I think I'm lucky I went through cancer and survived, because now I have this perspective that I wouldn't have if I didn't go through cancer. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I had a choice. I decided immediately that I was going to react positively, and I wasn't going to allow myself to be victimized by cancer, because this was my life.
I was down, but now I'm up.
Meet Michael Cramer, a 23-year-old cancer survivor, bone marrow transplant recipient, and motivational hero. Diagnosed with a rare cancer in 2020, Michael's journey has been full of heartbreak, hope, and resilience. After nearly losing his battle 3 times, he's still here, alive, inspiring, and sharing his story with the world. Through social media, Michael and his mom, Ashlee, continue to inspire others, turning their struggle into a mission of love and motivation.
I was down, but now I'm up.
You tuned into the EG Dominates podcast, coming to you from Winter Garden, Florida today, home base. And on today's episode, very, very special episode, I have Michael and his mom, Ashlee, joining us today from Miami. And they drove up to share their remarkable story with us. Michael is a cancer survivor, and being a cancer survivor myself, one of the things that I wanted to do with the podcast was to make a pivot and be able to interview people that are either struggling with cancer or cancer survivors, so that they can share their story in hopes that people can see it, they can learn from it, and the whole purpose is to just really spread the awareness. And Michael and his mom have an absolutely incredible story. So before we get started, I want to thank you guys so much for coming up here to do this. Shortly after I was diagnosed with cancer, it's called the stroke of God. I found you. I found your Instagram page, and I don't know how these things happen, but I saw you and I started watching your videos, and this is just really cool to have you be the first cancer survivor to share your story on my podcast, because honestly, you are the biggest inspiration for me personally, because from the time that I got diagnosed with cancer, watching your videos really kind of, it kept me sane, it kept me level. And you sharing your story really just meant a lot to me, because we can overcome anything, and life isn't always fair, and life's tough. And you're just such a good person, you and your mother. So we're really excited to hear your story today. So with that said, why don't we start off? Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you guys are from, and how you guys got to Miami. I know you said you lived down there for 20 years, but we're going to turn it over to you.
Wait, first we have to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that Instagram algorithm is just so good, isn't it?
It's crazy.
The algorithm is insane. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so honored that we met and I'm here. We would drive 4 hours anytime to be on this podcast. And
we would drive 5 hours.
Yeah, it's a blessing to be here. This is such a beautiful podcast.
Well, you guys are a blessing.
We are so honored to be here. We're so excited. So I will let you start talking, but I have to say thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been living in Miami for about 21 years, I would say now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born in France. I lived there for about a year, then moved to Montreal, then we moved here, and I have no memory of France or Montreal. I just pretty much remember everything from the point that we lived in Miami. And my mom can go a little deeper into why we were doing all that moving, because of...
Oh, it was, we moved. My husband was French, and actually I was a dancer.
Okay.
And I was in New York dancing. I went on tour, ended up in Europe on a tour, met my husband, who was a sound engineer. We fell in love, got married, stayed in France, had beautiful children, and he actually had a gig that took him to Montreal.
Okay.
So we went to Montreal for a year. And then another gig that took us to Miami for a year, went to Miami for a year, but we ended up staying. And I think it was a beautiful transition to life in Miami. My kids grew up, Michael can tell you, but the boys grew up on the water, windsurfing, surfing. My daughter grew up dancing. We had a beautiful life. And unfortunately, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. I don't know if you want to get into this, but he was diagnosed with cancer in 2014. And he actually, after 17 months, he passed away.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So we've had a long story with cancer, and it was 4 years later that Michael was diagnosed.
Wow.
Not the same cancer, supposedly not related, not genetic, but still an incredible shock.
Yeah.
An incredible shock. And I think the gift was that when he did pass away, you know, we always say it was a blessing. He was at home in hospice, and the kids at the time were 12, 14, and 16, and we were with him, and we were holding him, we were actually hugging him, and we were telling him we loved him when he took his last breath. And I think that was the biggest gift.
Just to be able to be there with him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it made Michael's diagnosis 4 years later an even bigger shock.
Yeah, it's scary, you know.
Yeah.
You know, being put in a situation like you and I have been put in, it's one of those things you never expect to hear you have cancer. And I think it's a testament to how you handle that news mentally, and being strong, not only for yourself, but for other people. That was one of the things I noticed right away with you and Maya about you. So previous to your cancer diagnosis, tell us a little bit about you as a person. What are your hobbies, your interests?
Yeah.
What was life like growing up for you?
Life was pretty good, you know, like she said, my mom said, we grew up in Miami. I was a windsurfer on the Olympic development team, and I kind of learned throughout the years just how to be disciplined and motivated to go to training every afternoon after a long day of school. It starts at like 6 a.m., go windsurf, go get yelled at by our coach, sailing in really tough conditions where the wind is light, which makes it harder, so you have to pump the sail. And we were pretty disciplined at a young age, and I think we grew up being sailors, being windsurfers, being competitors, and it gave me this sort of like respect for life and for, you know, different cultures. And we traveled to places like Italy, Latvia, Peru. We traveled like all over the world doing these crazy windsurfing competitions. And those 4 years, from my freshman year of high school to my senior year, we were going everywhere, like around the world windsurfing.
How did you get into windsurfing?
So I got into windsurfing because of a good friend of mine that my brother met this kid when he was in 5th grade, and they became friends. And his friend actually had a younger brother that was my age, and we were two brothers with two other brothers, and they were sailors, and they invited us to come to the sailing camp they had every single summer. So we went, and we started out sailing on these small little boats called open bicks.
Okay.
And we started doing competitions on those when we were about like 11, 12, I would say.
Where did you do the competitions at? Like, where did you practice in competition?
We practiced at the Miami Yacht Club.
Miami Yacht Club, okay.
Yeah, and we would sail in the bay, sometimes go out to the ocean. And then it just transitioned to windsurfing because everyone started doing windsurfing at the yacht club, and we were getting kind of big for this sailboat. It's a sailboat mainly made for very young kids and early teenagers. And we started windsurfing, and it became like this revolution with, there was like 4 or 5 of us that became very serious about it, and we're on this Olympic development team, and we would do these ODPs, these Olympic development programs that were at our yacht club actually every few months. And it was a really insane opportunity because the Olympic coach for U.S. sailing would be there, and he'd be giving us like lessons and tips, and it was super cool. We were part of an amazing community, and we were always in the water, always surfing. And that's why the cancer diagnosis for me was such a big shock, because I felt like I was so healthy, so fit, so athletic, in such good shape my whole life, that getting something like cancer at a young age just was not something I would ever expect. Like, yes, I watched my father pass away from cancer, but he was in his mid-50s, late 50s, and for me, that was something that I thought, okay, maybe one day I'll have to worry about cancer. But I didn't think at 19 years old I was going to be walking into a doctor's office, being asked to do a test called a bone marrow biopsy, and then waking up a few hours later being told I had a similar form of cancer to my father.
It's
Wow.
insane. Like, you know, you talk about prevention, and totally agree with cancer prevention, totally agree with diet and health and exercise. But Michael truly checked all the boxes for someone that should never get cancer, let alone at 19. Ate healthy, was athletic, was going to the gym, didn't eat a lot of sugar. You know, my husband as well was very healthy, but as Michael said, he was older, so not that we expected it at that age, but still a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
It was
You
out of the blue.
You don't hear that happen very often.
Out of the
And so
blue.
one of the first things you probably think too is, why me? You know, why is this happening to me?
But that was the one thing that I tried to never think about. And I think that's where I got that mindset, was like, I realized that if I was going to ask myself, why me, and play this whole victim card, which I always talk about on social media, is you can't be a victim, is because when I was diagnosed, I was going through a point in my life where I was becoming more spiritual. I was meditating, I was doing yoga, and I was going through a rough period of anxiety, actually, about a year before I was diagnosed. And this was when I was kind of finding myself. And I realized that when I was diagnosed with cancer, I had a choice, right? My mom always says this, like, you always have a choice in how you react. And I decided immediately that I was going to react positively, and I wasn't going to allow myself to be victimized by cancer, because this was my life. There was nothing I can do about it. I could either sit there, cry about it, and feel sorry for myself, or I could continue my treatments, hope for the best, and be positive. And I think that even if I were going to pass away from my cancer, I would rather die with a smile on my face than I would by being sad and feeling bad for myself. So I always thought like going into it with a positive attitude was the way to go, whether I was going to survive or not.
Yeah. So take us back to that time. So you're 19 years old. What were your symptoms? First of all, tell everyone what kind of cancer you were diagnosed with.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with hepatosplenic T-cell lymphoma, which is a super rare and aggressive form of lymphoma that affects the liver and the spleen. And my symptoms leading up to my cancer diagnosis were really nothing insane. You know, I was really just tired for a few months. It was the COVID lockdown. It was March of 2020 when I started to feel my symptoms. You know, I was home from college. I wasn't windsurfing. I wasn't surfing. The beaches were closed. Florida was crazy. It was just a weird time. And I remember going and working out at my friend's house because the gyms were closed. And this was the first time I ever needed pre-workout to work out, because I was so tired. I was like, I'm going to start taking pre-workout. And I never took it before. I never needed it. And I was taking pre-workout to work out, and I was sleeping in more. And the sun would come in through my window in the mornings, and I'd be really sweaty. And I was like, this is weird, but I guess it's just because of the sun, right? We're in Florida. It's hot. But eventually I realized that I was having these night sweats. Even if I closed the blinds all the way, it didn't matter. So I was having these night sweats. I was tired. And then about a month before my diagnosis, I started to notice some fevers. And that's when we went into our family pediatrician, did some blood work. She saw me. And then she referred me to a specialist at Nicholas Children's Hospital, which was her good friend. He was an oncologist. And he's actually the one who diagnosed me, because he saw my blood work. And he was like, you should probably do a bone marrow biopsy. And then we came in, did a bone marrow biopsy. And I remember waking up. They gave me anesthesia for it. And I remember waking up from it, and he just told me I had cancer. It was leukemia or lymphoma, and that it was treatable. And it was actually a children's hospital, so.
Did they tell you in person? Or
Yeah, it was in person. You know, it was during COVID, but we were there in person. Yeah.
Okay. I had a phone call.
Oh, that's horrible. I can't imagine that.
Yeah. So you're there in person. You guys are there together.
We were together.
Yeah, we were
Did
together.
you know? Did you have like a strong
No,
feeling or
nothing.
indication? So
Nothing.
this was so take us back then to when you got diagnosed with cancer. What was that feeling like for you? What do you remember?
It was just like survival mode. It was just like, all right, I'm going in. I just got diagnosed with cancer. What do I have to do to get rid of this? Like, what am I going to do so I can get better and get back to my life? Honestly, all I remember is the doctor telling me I'm going to get a port placed in the next day, and I was going to start chemo in a few days. And I started chemo actually like a few weeks later, because they couldn't give me my exact diagnosis for a few weeks, because they had to confirm with specialists all around the country, because my diagnosis is so rare, they didn't want to misdiagnose me. So they literally sent me home after a week in the hospital. I received multiple blood transfusions while I was there, because my hemoglobin was so low, which is why I was so tired. The cancer was affecting my body, and the hemoglobin is basically like, it's like your energy, you know, it's your red blood cells. And when those are low, you're pale, you're fatigued, you're out of breath. And those are some of the symptoms I had leading up to my diagnosis. Was I was a little more out of breath, I was tired. And it was insane to go from being so healthy and so athletic within like 2 weeks of my diagnosis, losing like 20 pounds and like becoming so skinny and so frail, and then starting chemo, lost all my hair, and it was like that body that I had, the muscular build, the tan, the blonde hair, it was all gone, and I was just looked like a cancer patient within a few weeks. It was really crazy.
Happens fast.
It happens very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mom,
So
how was
fast.
this for you? I mean, at this point, you just lost your husband a couple of years previous to that bone cancer, and now you're with your son, and you hear he has cancer. What was,
No,
what
it
was feeling?
was, and their symptoms were so different. It was so different. So I really never suspected cancer. And when, the pediatrician, our family doctor who called and said, okay, Ashlee, you need to take Michael to see the specialist. She didn't say oncologist. She said a friend of mine who's a specialist. So we walked in there thinking, I thought maybe he had COVID. Maybe he was anemic. I'm guilty. I say I'm guilty of being a vegan mom.
Yeah.
So this athletic 19-year-old, he's not getting enough red meat in his diet. Like we were literally thinking, okay, he needs almonds, he needs dark chocolate, maybe he needs some supplements. Literally, that's where our minds were. And when they did the bone marrow biopsy, it was very, very quick. He did the bone marrow biopsy, I was in the room, took Michael out, brought him back in. While he was still recovering, the doctor came in and he said, okay, first thing I'm gonna say is what you have is treatable. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, this is not, he's not getting supplements. This is bad. And he said, I think he has a form of leukemia or lymphoma, one or the other. And when he said leukemia, I had one image in my head, but when he said lymphoma, I think I didn't hear anything else. My husband had lymphoma, a different form of lymphoma, but he had lymphoma. Yeah. So when he said that, everything kind of just stopped. And then there was a moment that, Michael and I looked at each other. This doctor was beautiful. He stayed in the room. He talked to us. He spent about an hour talking to us, getting to know Michael, asking him about his life, talking to me. We were so lucky that it was the middle of COVID and we were at a pediatric hospital because I was with him.
What hospital were you guys at?
Nicholas Children's Hospital.
Okay.
And if he had been at an adult hospital, he would have been by himself. So he had me with him. And it's like Michael said, there's a moment, I think there was like this moment of insane like grief or this, something like hits you and shocks you, but then right away you go into, okay, survival mode.
Yeah.
And right away, what was really incredible about Michael was he did not say, why me? Right away we were like, okay, what do we have to do? What is the action we have to take? And I think we learned a lot from everything we went through with my husband. I think that's like the gift. We always talk about the beauty and the pain, and the beauty and the pain of losing my husband was that we knew so much. And it was almost like this gift, like, okay, maybe we're taking this on. Maybe we went through that for a reason, and maybe this is gonna help Michael. So it was shocking because we found out later when he was actually diagnosed with hepatosplenic T-cell lymphoma, the doctor said, don't Google it. That was the first thing he said.
Yeah.
But we did find out later that this is a cancer that most people do die, and most people don't get diagnosed. They die before diagnosis. So the gift for Mike, and it was hitting him right at that moment. That was why, like in those first few weeks, I saw him change from this athlete who was tired, but still looked like an athlete, to a cancer patient. I remember when we got home after that first week in the hospital, I remember getting out of the car and Michael getting out, and I remember watching him walk up the few steps to get into our home and thinking, oh my God, he looks just like my husband when my husband was going to pass away. It was shocking, and we'd only just found out he had cancer. So I think we talk a lot about mindset. Michael did face this with an incredible mindset, not why me. And later I was like, I've heard this before, why me? Why not me? Like, it could be anybody. We think it's someone else. Well, it was us.
Yeah.
And it was Michael. And why not Michael, So, I don't know, I attribute, we had a really strong family. I think going through this with my husband brought our family so close together. So he has 2 siblings, and I think the 4 of us just became this unit of just, okay, we're in this together. And I do think that helps so much. I see you. I see you with your family. I can tell already the little amount that we know you, how tight your family is, how tight you are with your wife, how important that is for you and your support. Connection is huge.
It is. It really is.
It is. Support
Having a
is
big,
huge.
having that support group around you,
Yeah.
means so much. You know, it really does. Wow. So, how do you treat this kind of cancer? So you get diagnosed.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what next steps are after
So
that.
next steps typically are just the most aggressive chemo you can do, and then a bone marrow transplant.
There's not a protocol.
There's not really, there's no real protocol for it. Like, I've met other people who have had the same cancer, and everyone has done something different depending on their age and how the cancer is. And for me at the time when I was going through this chemo, I kind of thought this is what chemo was like for like everybody, but I realized that the chemo I had was like very, very aggressive and intense chemo, and I lost my hair within like a week after chemo, like within a few days. It takes people sometimes several rounds to lose the hair, but for me it was the first round, and I did 3 rounds of 21-day cycles of chemo, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was. And then I had a procedure called a bone marrow transplant. And what they do is, with the bone marrow transplant, it's not actually a surgery. A lot of people think of bone marrow transplants like a surgery where you get a literal transplant of a bone marrow, but bone marrow is blood, so it basically is like a blood transfusion of someone who's a donor that's a match to your blood. So what they do is they want to destroy because your bone marrow is essentially your immune system. So what they want to do is essentially destroy your immune system so that you have space to have a new immune system come into you. So what they do is they give you very, very intense radiation and then chemotherapy on top of that to put your white blood cells, which is your immune system, to 0.0. So you have zero immunity. So when I was in the hospital for this bone marrow transplant, I was like the boy in the bubble, like no immune system. So like no one could come visit me. Like the nurses had to wear masks and gowns. It was like I couldn't leave my room for several weeks. Like I couldn't even like walk around the hospital for like a month. Like I was in that room, that singular room, for a month because my immune system wasn't there. It takes time for it to come back.
So what did you do during that time?
The thing is, like, I was so sick and almost like passed away. So like that time is kind of like a blur to me. It was like
I played music.
She played. And I had
We
these,
talked a lot.
yeah, these weird like faint memories of like me like sitting there on my. I thought I was on my phone, but I'm not. I'm just hallucinating because of the inflammation. And I'm sitting there like this, like thinking I'm on my phone. And there's videos I posted on Instagram, some of them, and I'm here bald, sitting like this, thinking I'm on my phone, but I'm not. I'm just hallucinating. And at one point, I was like, "Why is my grandfather in the room with us? No one can visit us," and he wasn't there. Like, you know, it was crazy.
It was scary.
Yeah, that whole time, like those 6 weeks I was there was kind of a blur up until the end. The last 2 weeks when I started to recover, and my bone marrow was the new bone marrow from a donor was becoming mine, and I was engrafting those stem cells.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We were lucky.
So it's
with
kind
that.
of confusing. It's a lot of information, but yeah, it's a bone marrow transplant. It's fairly common in people with leukemia and lymphoma.
Yeah. Wow.
But that was a blessing to be at a pediatric hospital.
Yeah, because she could be with me.
I did not leave. I stayed with him.
The whole time.
Like I had nurses 24/7, but I needed her because she can call the nurse when I was vomiting. Like during that time, I vomited like 50 or 60 times in total. Like no joke. Like I vomited so much, I was popping blood vessels in my eyes. Like I had to have an eye patch.
Man.
Like it was all these crazy complications I would have. Like I couldn't like my throat hurt so much because of all the vomit that was coming out of me. Like it was a really intense time.
So you're in the hospital the entire time.
Yeah,
right?
for those 6 weeks. Yeah.
For those 6 weeks. You get done with the chemo,
Yeah.
and at that point you go home.
Yeah, after the 6 weeks, I went home, but then we came back like a few days later because I developed the condition I live with now called graft versus host disease.
Graft versus host disease.
Yeah,
okay.
which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the graft of the donor stem cells that are fighting the host, which is me, because you're putting this person who's a donor to me, and a perfect match actually, you're putting his stem cells into my body, but it's realizing, okay, this isn't the original host's body, so I'm going to start fighting these organs, because that's what you do when you recognize something as foreign. That's what the immune system does. And you calm it down with immunosuppressants and immunotherapies, but GVHD can be just as bad as cancer. And it was like that for me for the first 2 years after getting diagnosed with graft versus host disease. Is we were in the hospital. It was harder than going through chemo because we were there for 5 months at one point because my GVHD was affecting my liver so much, and my liver was basically failing. They were telling me I was going to have a liver transplant. You know, it was all these complicated things that came from this stem cell transplant. And I still live with this disease to this day, but now it's thankfully under control.
Wow.
Still
Yeah.
in treatment, still on you just
Like the
saw him
cancer's in
take-
remission.
Just before this, he just
But
took
yeah.
one of his immunosuppressants.
Yeah.
So still in treatment,
But the cancer's in remission, which is good. It's just this chronic illness that came from the transplant.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of your videos where you talk about, you
Yeah.
know, after cancer, the other things that have happened to you since
Right.
then. Can you kind of share what that experience has been like? Because I know you said you had a knee replacement. Kind of keep the progression of your story. So you get released from the hospital, but then you're back in the hospital and you're kind of going in and out. And at that point, what are some of the other things, challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so right after the transplant, I developed graft versus host disease in my GI, in my skin, my mouth, and my liver, and they're all still there. It's just much more controlled. And we were sent home, back to the hospital, went there for like 2 weeks. We were there for Christmas and New Year's. And then up until April of 2021, we were going to the hospital 3 times a week for infusions.
would be admitted for a week here and there.
Yeah,
It was
and then
just in and out of the hospital constantly.
and then we were in and out of the hospital for a bit, and then from I would say it was October.
And you're 20 years old.
Yeah, I was 20 years old at this point.
Wow.
I'd say from October of 2021 till April of 2022, I was basically admitted that whole time. Like we go home for like a weekend or something, but I was just because I was so sick and my liver was not doing well. I had to have my gallbladder removed. I had a drain in my liver because I had ascites. So many different complications at that point were happening. And the liver GVHD was the worst. So when you looked at me back then, I was yellow. Like my eyes were yellow, my skin was yellow. And they didn't really know what to do, the doctors. So they referred me to a specialist at a different hospital, adult hospital.
Okay.
He's a specialist in graft versus host disease. And he started me on this treatment called extracorporeal photopheresis, which is the thing I do now if you've seen it on my Instagram. And basically, I got a double port for it. They put 2 needles into your port. They take out your blood and essentially weaken your white blood cells and then return it to you. And they do this like twice a week, every week for about 6 weeks at first and see if it works.
Okay.
And I've been doing this treatment now for over 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's gotten, I do it now every like 6 weeks, but before it was every week, twice a week. And I've done about 156 treatments of this. So it's not
And
even.
so you're actually taking, and you're doing it yourself.
No. The nurses do it. Yeah.
Okay. All
It's
right.
It's
I'm
a
like,
big old
No.
machine
Okay.
with millions of dollars.
okay. I'm like, whoa.
No, I can never do that myself because
Oh,
they
no,
access
this
me
is-
with these big.
So you're
needles.
going
If
to the
we spend the
hospital then,
day-
or you're going to get this done how often now?
Now it's every 6 weeks.
Every 6 weeks. And how long does it take?
Twice in that week.
Yeah,
how-
twice
like-
in that week.
Hour, 2 hours?
It's about
About
2.5 hours. The treatment itself, but like by the time you get to the hospital, wait to get started,
Sure.
set up the
Get
machine, get
access.
access.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a whole day thing because you know how it goes with the hospital. So they basically were there from like usually at 11, usually like 11 to 4 were there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So at what point did you start to say, you know what? I'm starting to feel better.
Yeah, so that point was difficult. It was when they started me on this drug called Resurrock. Shout out to Resurrock, I guess.
Are we allowed to say
Yeah,
that?
no, we're definitely allowed to say it.
Yeah,
It's
of
fine.
course.
Okay.
There have been he had to film.
Yeah, I had to
multiple
film many
people-
lines
Yeah.
of treatment before getting to this drug. And when they started me on this drug, that's when my liver started to improve. And they were like, you don't have to be admitted to the hospital anymore because your liver's improving. Just come in like 2-3 times a week for the next few months. And it's so complicated to explain because there's so much. But like, yeah,
There was that.
this
There was
medication
also another. You were also getting
and immunotherapy on top of
immunotherapy
that.
infusions at the same time.
How did
and there
you
were a lot
feel
of things
during
working
all this?
together.
I felt horrible, like horrible. It was awful. Like I just felt awful all the time.
Just run down and kind of tired mentally and physically? Or
Yeah, it was both, and I was also on a lot of steroids at the time. They give you steroids for inflammation. It's actually one of the most common immunosuppressants is steroids. and they can make you like crazy and sad and anxious. And I was on them for a long time, and eventually when I finally got off of them, that's when I got better, which is crazy because it's the most common treatment for graft versus host disease is steroids. And then when I switched to this drug Rezurock, my liver started to heal, and it was really interesting because it was like the last resort. It was Rezurock basically, because like nothing was working and I was probably gonna die because of how sick I was and how bad my liver was doing. And it took me a while to feel better because at that point I was like 114 pounds. Like I had lost like in total my whole journey over like 65 pounds. And at that point I was so skinny, so frail. I even had a drain in my liver, and I was finally doing better. So I took the drain out of my liver. I was only taking the Rezurock and doing the immunotherapy, and they sent us home.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had no appetite because graft versus host disease messes with your appetite. And then they put me on a medication that helped me with my appetite a little bit. I started to gain weight. I started to like go on walks and be more active at home, and the treatment became outpatient. And ever since 2022 of April, I haven't been admitted to the hospital for graft versus host disease complications. So we've been at home for the last 2 years. Well, it's gonna be 3 years soon, actually, which is crazy.
Isn't that crazy? Time's going by fast?
Yeah, it goes by.
It doesn't go by fast. It's been
it
100
depends.
years since he was diagnosed.
Yeah, it's been
with
100
cancer.
years since I was diagnosed.
We've
Yeah.
lived so many lifetimes. Like when I think about it,
Yeah.
okay, maybe it's crazy. It's been 3 years, but I feel like we've lived so many lifetimes.
Yeah.
But there's, it wasn't just that all of a sudden he felt better. I mean, maybe
It's very
easier.
slow, gradual.
I would say
this has been a slow, and still to this day,
Yeah, sure.
he still has. He's still
I would
in
say like I
the
started to feel better like this year, like August of this year was when like at a turning point. 'Cause I started getting back to the gym and like exercising more regularly. I had my knee replaced a year ago because of complications from the graft versus host disease. So yeah, so it's probably been like 2 years since 2.5 years after I was last admitted that I'm more recovered. So
Okay.
it's crazy how long it takes to recover. We were talking about it.
Yeah.
Like you get cancer, you get diagnosed within minutes, but then the recovery takes years. It's just insane.
I thought, without doing too much searching online, I thought in my mind that 6 months after my surgery
Yeah.
that I was going to be back to normal and
No.
Yeah.
I was going to have some dental implants and have a like an implant denture and everything will be fine. And here we are, almost I'm almost at the 6 month mark, and the road there's still a long way to go. I still have a couple more surgeries and everything else. So, I'm kind of at the early stages of it. So hearing you kind of talk about the progression and, just it's not something that you can heal from fast. Like kind of the
No, I
mindset
mean,
you think about.
You always think that. Sometimes, I thought it would take me like just a few months after my bone marrow transplant, I was going to be back. And,
Oh.
I thought it was just going to be a few months,
Yeah.
and then it's been
We were
years.
like day 100, with the bone marrow transplant. There's it's called the day 100. It's kind of like you've heard 5 years, when you're 5 years in remission,
Yeah.
people are like, yay, that's a celebration. Even though we've heard many stories after 5 years. But it's the same thing with a bone marrow transplant. Once you hit 100 days, they're like, yes, you're good. And so that was our, we were like, okay, he made it. He survived the chemo and he made it to the bone marrow transplant, which was like this big blessing that he survived to get there. And we were like, now you are home free. You're going to go through this hard part. But that's the hard part about cancer. There is a roadmap. There's a roadmap. Here's the treatment. But then what happens after that?
Yeah,
You know,
there's no map.
and that's what
That's
the-
where you guys are at now, right?
yeah, and that's where the GVHD has been, is that there is no roadmap, there's no end date, there's no plan now. Now it's just, okay, let's see what happens. You recover, you do but that's why you have to live now. That's why you can't wait, because we don't know. No one knows, but there's something with cancer that puts it like right here, like right in your face. Survival, right?
I saw something yesterday that I shared on social media, and it was a quote that said that there's graveyards full of people
Yeah, I
who
saw
thought
that.
they had more time.
Yeah, I saw that on your story. Yeah, it's so true.
It's so true. So, talk to me about downtime, because I think about how much downtime I had from the time I had surgery until the time that I started kind of getting back to work and things like that. In my downtime, I spend a lot of time on social media, watching movies, watching some like religious, like docuseries stuff that I thought was kind of cool. What was your experience like?
Yeah, it was up and down because a lot of times I was so sick to the point where I just had to sit there and like lay down and not look at a screen.
Yeah.
But there were points when I had to take a break from social media actually because I had so much support and so much love that it was hard to answer everybody, and it was stressing me out, and I was so sick. So when I was going through it with my liver, when I was almost gonna pass away, like I went off social media. I probably scared a lot of my friends. I would answer their texts, but I wouldn't answer anyone's direct messages on Instagram or Snapchats or anything. And I just took a break from social media, and in the hospital we would make up raps in the hospital. Like we would do raps together in the hallways. We would watch movies at the children's hospital. They had like
you guys would make up songs?
Yeah.
we make up rap
You can
songs.
find them on YouTube.
Can I hear a couple of verses? You guys have
I don't know if
come
I
on,
can-
you guys spent 4 hours in the car. You guys didn't sing together in the car?
We're actually coming up with a new rap soon.
We're working on a GVHD.
You guys got an album coming out soon?
Michael and Mom, we got it going on.
We just came back from
Cancer Cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy, we can rap for you if you want.
Yeah, you have some stuff on YouTube. So yeah, we tried to be creative in our downtime and use our brains a little. And
We did we started our podcast.
yeah, we started the podcast.
You know, that
So-
was
so
one
tell-
thing
so-
that came out of that.
Anyone that's watching this, tell us a little bit about your podcast.
It's Michael and Mom Talk Cancer.
Okay.
And we just started it because actually one of my friends who was going through cancer it was kind of crazy. Like I had a friend from high school who was a musician, and he told me that one of his friends that went to FIU with him was just diagnosed with cancer. And it was the same time I was diagnosed with cancer. And at this point it was COVID. I'd not known anyone who had been through cancer, but this guy was my age, living in Orlando, going through cancer, and I'm gonna have a bone marrow transplant just like me. And he went through chemo, he had his bone marrow transplant, and actually he recovered quicker than I did, which is amazing. And he started doing a podcast just talking about his journey. He did like 4 or 5 episodes, and then that was it. And I was like, Mom, like, we should do a podcast. Like, he did a podcast, I think we should do one, and we should also interview cancer patients.
Well, it started out, we were just going to tell the
Yeah,
story.
we're just gonna tell
we
the
had
story.
6 episodes. We were going to do diagnosis, chemo, BMT. We had a plan for 6 episodes. I think now we're up to almost 60.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, we've done a lot. And
We've done a lot.
yeah,
And you guys have a big social media following on Instagram as well, right? What's your Instagram handle so people can follow you?
Michael Reed Cramer, MichaelReedCramer, Michael Reed Cramer, and
Ashlee Cramer, ASHLEECRAMER, Ashlee Cramer. His mom, but you can always find me on his.
yeah.
we cameos
Yeah, but
on each other's.
Yeah, I think the downtime, it's important to try to be creative, because it is easy to just sit there and watch movies and scroll social media. But I think, like, I started playing guitar, actually. That was one of the things I learned when I was going through just, like, after I got home from being in the hospital for so long, because I still couldn't, like, go to the gym. I was still doing treatment twice a week. So I was like, I want to do something that I can just do at home that's really easy and simple. And that was guitar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Music has been a big part, as you can tell.
Yeah, the
Music
rap,
has been
guitar,
important. Yeah.
YouTube videos, I think also making social media content as well is also like, it's fun because like it's something that other people are going to see and you're going to get responses and meet new people. It's also like really good to make connections when you're going through cancer. And I think social media for someone going through cancer, it can be difficult because you're seeing other people's lives living normally. When you're in the hospital, that sucks. But it's also important to make connections on social media of other people going through cancer. And I've met you through social media.
I was going to say, just like
I was
you
gonna
met
say,
Michael
like,
that way.
that's why it's also so important to try to be on social media if you're going through cancer or rare disease or anything, because there's so many communities out there.
You see it, and our cancers are so opposite of each other, right? But I'm sitting there, literally sitting in that chair that you're sitting in right now for 3.5 months, every single day, while I was healing. And I remember seeing and watching your videos thinking to myself, man, look at this guy. Look at Michael. If Michael can do it, I know I can do it.
Yeah, for sure.
So you are a huge inspiration.
Thank
which
you.
kind of leads me to my next point. Talk to us about the projects and things that you guys are working on recently. Because I know you guys are doing a lot of stuff. You guys just got back from Rome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And I know that you have a support group. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. I think yesterday we were messaging. But talk to me about kind of what you guys are doing to help spread the awareness and just your passion projects.
You know, this happened really organically. I'm just going to tell really briefly the story. You know, when Michael was first diagnosed, as he said, the chemo was super aggressive. His hair fell out like within days. And I tell the story, he had a group of like 6 friends and his brother. They shaved their heads with Michael. I was a good mama. I took a video. I posted the video on Instagram. And all of a sudden, there was like this great outpouring of love. And I think that support, we always say like that set the tone. So little by little, we started sharing the story on Instagram because we just realized how many people it was touching. And then that led eventually to the podcast. We wanted to dig deeper. The podcast, the raps were something fun that we ended up posting and having a lot of fun with. But then it was just very organic that as we reached out, and also Michael was diagnosed during COVID. There were no in-person support groups. You were not walking in the hospital halls meeting other patients.
Sure.
People were in their rooms, not only during his BMT, but like at other times. You know, it was very isolating, especially during COVID. So we ended up finding people through Instagram, through social media. People would reach out. And we both started support groups, virtual support groups, Michael for cancer survivors and me for cancer caregivers. And to this day, I mean, it's been 2.5 years, we still lead our groups.
So how often do you guys like have calls with the groups?
Every week, yeah. She had hers this morning. I had mine last night. So.
But even during the week, people reach out. Now we're open to that.
Is it any kind of cancer, or are you guys kind of specific to?
It's any kind of cancer.
Any kind of cancer.
Yeah, typically my group is mainly like young adults will come into my group because I'm a young adult.
Sure.
And
how do I find your group if I'm watching
so my
this?
group, yeah,
Like how if I'm going battling cancer right now and I want to be on your support group, how do I get involved in that?
yeah, you should probably just send me a message on Instagram
Okay.
because I used to have a link on it, but now I don't anymore because it changed from it was on a different app and the app started charging people.
Okay.
So we moved it to Discord, if you know what Discord is. Yeah, so I do it on Discord now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, but that's huge. And then just little by little, I think we realized, you know, we have this thing on the refrigerator that says the best way to help yourself is to help others.
yeah.
And I think we just kind of embodied that. And it was so helpful for us to like share the story, to talk to other people. And I could see with Michael when he connected with other people how much it helped him and me as well.
Yeah.
So that happened naturally. And then little by little, people started asking us to speak and share our story. And so we've been blessed that we've had the opportunity to volunteer and talk to people about this story, be on podcasts.
What are some of the things
share-
you guys have volunteered? Give me some specifics.
Oh yeah, there's like we volunteer at Sylvester, we volunteer at Nicholas,
Okay.
we speak. We were just in Rome talking, actually we were talking to pharmaceutical people about not a specific drug, but about graft versus host disease. So, you know, so often I think the human side of cancer, sometimes it gets lost.
Yeah.
So we've been blessed to really share that human side. And he's so open, you know, it's wonderful that a young guy that's 23 years old is so open about sharing his story.
Absolutely.
And also the relationship we have, I think that's kind of cool too. So,
Yeah, we've done a lot of stuff with like the American Cancer Society, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, just anyone who even has a nonprofit or anyone who even has a podcast and is just like, you want to talk about your cancer journey and spread
like
awareness.
we can touch
like,
one person, yes, we're in.
Yeah, we just
we
try to
can
do
help,
everything
we're
we
in.
can, and she's about to publish a children's book actually.
I saw that.
I
So-
Yes, that looks
Hopefully
awesome.
by the time this episode comes out, it'll be out, and you guys can get my mom's children's book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started following that that page that you had tagged.
Yeah.
That looked really, really good. So imagine like I'm sitting here, I'm somebody that's going through cancer right now. If I was to take a snippet right now and make this into a 90-second reel, what do you want people to know about you?
About me,
Yeah.
or what I should give them advice for going through cancer.
That.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about cancer is it's so difficult. It's so challenging, and when you're diagnosed with cancer, you're so lost because you're like, you probably don't know that many people have been through cancer. You probably don't even know what exactly your cancer is and what the treatment's gonna be. But the thing is, like, going through cancer, you're gonna find it's gonna help teach you who you are. You're gonna probably meet some amazing people, and you're gonna become part of this cancer community that is so beautiful and so loving. And going through cancer, it's not a bump in the road. It's not like a car. It's not something that just happens for no reason. You know, there's always a reason why we go through these things. And going through cancer is gonna make you a better person. It's gonna make you more grateful for life. And it's going to teach you these lessons that you would probably never learn unless you're dead. Like, it literally, you face death right in the eye, and you look at it, and you're diagnosed with cancer, you know. So it teaches you how short and precious life is. And I think it's a blessing that I went through cancer. I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure, don't feel the same way, but I think I'm lucky I went through cancer and survived, because now I have this perspective that I wouldn't have if I didn't go through cancer.
And what about from a mother's standpoint, watching your son go through this,
Yeah.
ups and downs of this journey? What kind of like advice would you give to a mother or a father or somebody that has a son or daughter that's going through this?
I mean, I have so many pieces of advice, but my biggest one, and Michael knows it, is that we always say, people want Michael to get back to who he was before, back to surfing, back to this, back to college, back to friends. Ashlee, get back to your life. We don't want to go back. Everything we've been through, we don't want to bounce back. We want to bounce forward, because this changes you. And I think that when you go through something like cancer, you are not the same person that you were before. But that is actually the gift. Like, that is the beauty and the pain. That is the blessing, is that you are deeper, you are richer. And I just want to hug you right now, because I'm looking at you and I feel you. And it changes you so much. But it does make you deeper and wider. And it's so hard, but we have to adapt. We change, we learn, we grow. That's my biggest message. And also, the second message is just as important, and it is that you are not alone. I don't know what it is, but when we're going through cancer, all of a sudden we tend to isolate. And we're like, oh my God. Maybe it's because we don't want to be a burden on someone else. I think sometimes, I didn't want to be a burden on friends. Maybe that's why I isolated. Maybe because Michael, his friends could not, for the life of them, as wonderful as they are, understand what he's going through. But what we need is other people. And there are other people. There are people that get you. There are people that go through this. There are people that want to love you, that want to support you. And I think it's accepting that you're not alone. And there are so many ways to connect. So whether it's with Michael on Instagram, or me, whether it's with you with the podcast, you're not alone. I think that's a huge, huge message. And all of us, if you're not going through cancer and you're listening to this, we all go through crap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it depends on how you react to it. You can take it and you can learn and you can grow. I love what Michael said. There's so many lessons in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? The whole Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
You're not a victim. You can choose. You can make the choice not to be the victim.
Yeah. You literally, you raised a really good point, that I had to come to terms, to grip with terms that I'm not ever going to be the same person again that I was before this.
I get that.
Mentally and physically.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It is. It's something. It takes. I knew this. I would never go back to the same person I was before years ago, and it's still something you struggle with. But it's like you said, you don't bounce back. You bounce forward, and you become a better version of yourself. And I think that, I look different. I am different. It's not the same, but it's more beautiful and it's more rich, this life. And you're just full of gratitude and love when you go through something like cancer, and it is a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you guys have coming up in the future? What would you say is your next 12 months look like?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of speeches coming up, actually. We're doing some speeches at different events for the American Cancer Society called Relay for Life, and then we're going to an event in New York in April, actually, to talk, and that's going to be super, super cool. Very excited for that. And
What kind of talk is it?
I forgot exactly.
It's for patient advocacy.
Right.
Okay.
we'll be
Patient
speaking.
advocacy.
And same another one in June as well.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of speeches coming up. We have the children's book coming up, which is it's about Michael.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's got a cancer children's book. It's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things coming up. Our continuing with our podcast.
Just sometimes we feel like there's not a lot going on, but then like it just stacks up and there's all these events coming. But there's always stuff coming up for us. I feel like as long as we're here and we're living, we're gonna continue to just spread our message with anyone who'll hear it and anyone who listens. So,
Which is you guys. I've kind of learned that what we're doing is so important for other people, but I think there's a lot of people that unfortunately have a different mindset. You know, if you look at the statistics we were talking about earlier, you know, I think I saw a statistic recently that said that people that they're going through cancer or are cancer survivors, the suicide rate is like 3 times higher than the normal average population. And I think it's because you're not going to be the same as you were before. Mm-hmm. And if you have a hard time accepting that and coming to grips with that, it's really tough for people. So the more they can hear a positive message from survivors like us, from caregivers like yourself, it is one of those things that is just so important. You know, I've got 3 young kids. You know, I want my kids to see me in a positive light, not be depressed. You know, I got my good days and bad days, just like I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, we all do.
You know, and that's okay too. That's something that people need to know. You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And that's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay, you know.
The mental health side to cancer, I feel like it's getting better, but it's something that I know with my husband, it was never addressed. The mental health side was never addressed with Michael.
It was addressed a lot,
was.
thankfully. From the get-go when I was diagnosed, I had a therapist come in and became my therapist. So honestly, where I was treated and everything, it was amazing. Like, I'm so blessed that I had all this support from the start, honestly.
Yeah, because the emotional and the mental is just as hard, if not harder. And when treatment ends, we were talking about, when treatment ends and that roadmap is at the end, there's still like, you have to deal with all the emotions. Cancer is with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So it is something, I love that you said that. It is so important to know that we also need to focus on like our emotional health, our mental health as well. It all goes together. But that's where also support comes in, and like accepting support and realizing that you can't go back and adapting, but it is a gift. So I think that is our message is, you know, reach out. You are gonna, it's a daily practice. It's not like every day we're like, whoa, rainbows and roses
Sunshine,
and unicorns.
yeah.
Of course not.
Yeah.
It's hard. There are hard days too. And I see for Michael, there's days he's like, damn it, my friends can do this and I can't. And there's days that he's like, and I'm like, okay, you're right. It sucks. But then we remember, but still alive.
Yeah.
Breathing, touching other people, like so many other beautiful pieces of perspective in this short life. He's like 100 years old in wisdom, you know? He's a 23-year-old with like the wisdom of a 100-year-old guru. And I think he has so much. I hope I have a little of that as well.
You're very well spoken.
Thank you.
You carry yourself very, very well.
Thank you. You too.
Like I said, you're just a huge inspiration to me. So so grateful for you guys coming up here to shoot this podcast episode and have a chance to finally meet you guys in person. It's been absolutely fantastic. So I want to thank you guys for coming on the show. Any parting words of wisdom?
I said so many
We
words.
talked about a lot.
I probably
Yeah.
said too
We
many
talked
We
words.
talked about a lot. Yeah.
I would say you can allow yourself to cry and break down, but you just can't stay in that place forever. Like, give yourself space to feel sad, whatever it is you're going through. Don't neglect your emotions. Don't be toxically positive like we talk about.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to push through and be a strong man, but you have to keep going. You know, you're allowed to break down, you're allowed to be sad, but you have to find that balance of being sad and still being able to push through.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Yeah.
We have a thing in my caregiver group. We say sometimes you have to cry to make space for the joy.
Yeah.
You do. Sometimes you
Right.
can't move forward unless you break down.
Sometimes you do. You have
Ugly
to, like,
cry, just get it out.
and
Yeah,
that's
just get
good.
it out.
And
Yeah.
we also talk about, you can shower in your emotions.
Oh,
But you
yeah.
don't want to sit in the bath of your emotions. You don't want to stay there.
Yep.
Like, take a shower through it, but don't sit in it forever.
Move on.
Move on.
Yep.
Get through it. I love that. That was great that you said that. That was beautiful. And also go outside. Go outside.
Yeah, it's true. Different
Move your
perspective changes a
body.
lot.
Breathe. There's like so
Get the
many
sun.
little...
Get out there.
Yeah, get out there.
Yeah, sometimes just going outside, even if you can't take a walk, maybe if you just go outside. Nature is so healing, and mentally as well,
Absolutely.
not just physically. So there's like so many pieces. We have like a whole little manual that's going to come out too for caregivers, but also for
That would be great.
survivors.
That would be great.
That's coming too.
Well,
Look
look,
for it.
I love you guys, and
No,
you got friends for life and me. So thank you again so much. It's been an honor. Thank you.
It's
No,
an
thank you.
honor.
We're honored to be here.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Cool.
I was down, but now I'm up.